Good morning, hello and welcome. Good afternoon, good evening to our online attendees. Welcome to this buildingSMART room session as part of the buildingSMART International Standards Summit, Rome 2023. Thank you for joining. My name is Claire and I will be your moderator today along with Laura. Today's session is titled Standards Collaboration Panel. The speakers you will hear from are shown on the screen here. The session is scheduled to last 90 minutes. The session is being recorded and will be made available in the replay section of the event as soon as possible. Before I hand over to our speakers, I would like to remind you that this is a hybrid event. For online attendees, your microphones will remain muted for the duration of the session. If you wish to ask a question, please use the chat box in the control panel. For those in the room, please try to keep background noise to a minimum and raise your hand if you wish to make a comment or ask a question. I would also like to bring your attention that buildingSMART is committed to ensuring that participation in the development of standards is unrestricted and the process for their adoption is transparent, and standards that are developed do not favor any particular provider and are open, non-binding and accessible to all. Please take note of our antitrust code of conduct. Now, I would like to hand over to Tomi Henttinen.
Okay, good morning. My name is Tomi Henttinen. I was asked to chair this session. The session is about my favorite subject, standards. We will start with like a 5-minute slide shows each of us. And I ask the panelists to introduce themselves as you show your slides. So we start probably with mine. So the theme for this panel is standards, and more precisely, how standards work together. And how do we make best out of the using standards? In Finland, everybody has their own summer cottage. And when you have your own summer cottage, it's like we have these different, it's like similar thing that there's lots of different standardization bodies. And everybody wants to be in their own summer cottage, not to bother anybody else. And this is the similar thing with standards many times, that we are kind of in silos. Each summer cottage, you have a sailing boat, and it's like using developing standards. Everybody sails their own boat to their own direction, and I think that when we really start thinking that what standards are and why we have standards, that's not the way it should be done. So instead, we should do this. We should sail the same, we should row the same boat to the same direction. And in order to do that, we need to think, what are the roles? What roles the different standardization organizations have? And this is the kind of the big theme for today's panel. That's all about from me. And then maybe Emma.
Hi everyone, my name is Emma Hooper and I'm Associate Director and Head of R&D at Bond Bryan Digital in the UK. I'm also Vice Chair of buildingSMART UK and Ireland, and I also sit on the B55 committee for the British Standards Institute. So we're kind of responsible for the information management and BIM standards within the UK. So my presentation is just a few taster slides of what I'm going to present this afternoon. So this is how I view information management across the life of an asset. There is an activity-based management layer which people interact with, and secondly, an information layer, and this is typically what technology interacts with. Now, if we overlay some of the main standards, the ISO 9650 series generally is from the management side, and then in the depths of the information layer, there are many standards as shown, and this also includes many, many more. And I believe we really need to connect all this up to be able to manage information effectively. So ISO 19650, what is it? Well, to start with, it's a suite of these 6 standards which were based on the old BS 1192 standards in the UK. So let's start with the common title of the standards. The ISO 19650 series is all about information management using building information modeling. So there's 2 important concepts here. The first is information management, which is about the specification, delivery, and governance of just the right amount of information concerning the design, construction, operation, and maintenance of buildings and infrastructure. And that's across all information, whether that's structured or unstructured. And then we have building information modeling, which is the process of managing the structured information within this wider information management landscape. So if I was to sum up ISO 19650, it would be about delivering useful information, because we're terrible at this as an industry, and reducing risk, because when things go wrong in construction, it's generally something to do with information. And as an industry obsessed with risk, we barely ever think about information risk. So ISO 19650 is based all around appointments. And from a process perspective, if we revisit the diagram and overlay the main activities, we have cycles of specify, procure, plan, deliver, assure, store, present, and exploit. And, you know, basically what happens is a client specifies what information they want. They then go out to select the right people to supply that information. The delivery team then plan the information, then deliver it. And then the whole assurance process takes place, which is comparing the delivered information against the original requirements. And then once handed over to the client then stores it, uses it to then visualize their different uses, and then actually uses it for either sort of internal technology systems or for reporting. ISO 19650 focuses on information models as the main deliverable at a project and asset level. And an information model in the standards is a collection of alphanumerical, geometrical information and documentation, which is stored within a common data environment. The majority of standards in the information layer are actually about creating these information models. Therefore, bringing this together, ISO 19650 treats information as an asset. It's a framework of activities to manage information exchanges, to design, build, and maintain information models in the context of appointments across the whole life of an asset, in parallel with the design, build, and maintenance of the physical asset. Therefore, to do information management, we have to have both layers working together. And if we join the layers up, I believe there is a common thread throughout. And I'm going to talk about this much more in my presentation this afternoon. But in summary, I believe there is a common data model which underpins ISO 19650, one language throughout which technology plugs into. And this will provide the basis of future initiatives such as AI and linked data. But if we don't start thinking in a connected way, then we're going to have problems. And I have 2 main concerns. The first is around the overwhelming amount of standards. The quantity is difficult to keep top on, but joining them up is even more complex because some overlap and contradict. So I think we need to pause and focus on the bigger picture, work back and rationalise what we already have. And then secondly, as organisations understand the benefits of data, I'm really worried they're going to go and start to build their own data models from scratch, not realising standards already exist. And then we're going to have a massive problem with interoperability in the future. That's me. So who's next?
Hello, everybody. I must say this is my first time at the summit, and I'm impressed by, the atmosphere that I sense, and very happy to be here. So my name is Jeroen van der Holst. I'm from A-Team International. I'm the community director, and A-Team is a simple type product classification standard. A-Team stands for A-Team Technical Information Model. It's fully integrated into the BSDD, you can access it through the BSDD. We've been a classification standard since 1991. It's supported and implemented by the industry. There are millions of product records already classified according to ETIM, and that's something that we should, think about. It's already there. It's up for grabs, and it has a lot of technical features already. Maybe it's not perfect according to all the ISO standards, but it's there. And all these records are maintained by the original manufacturer. We are active in 5 sectors. We have, over the 30 years, already defined over 5,500 product classes. In HVAC, electrical, plumbing, sanitary, tools and site supplies, shipbuilding, and also construction products. We also have a very solid governance structure. We are an association funded by our members, and our members are mainly originating from branch organizations of manufacturers and wholesalers. And we are organized from the bottom up. That means that working groups on the national level of people who are experts in their trade, of their products, are working on our classes. We are represented by 20 chapters who are representing 24 countries. But if you look at the online stats of our classification management tool, which is accessible, it's open for everybody. By the way, ETIM is a very open standard. It's under Common Creative License. Everybody can use it. If you would like to influence it, it's about becoming a member of one of the chapters. That's where the work is organized. If you look at the stats of the classification management tool of 2022, you can see that the standard is used all over the world, which surprised me actually as well. Where can you get ETIM classified data? You can get it straight from the manufacturer. You can get it straight from the wholesaler. But there are also a number of national or centralized data pools that collect data from these manufacturers and wholesalers. And the cool thing about data pools is that you can query on what's available in a whole country or a whole industry. So if you have a requirement for a certain product with certain specific characters, you could just do a very generic query and then end up with results of what could be a technical compatible product. So where do we fit in? This is where it becomes a little bit technical. By funneling our classification system through the BSDD, we become available in the world of construction, where BSDD is used as a tool to implement data structures. And that is allowing for the, in the upper part you see that there is already exchange going on between manufacturers, wholesale, and the centralized data pools. So if you can connect that, what you basically end up with is a connection between the design side and the supply chain on the other hand. So we are very thrilled to see what our publication on BSDD is resulting in the future. So we're very happy to talk with anybody who would like to take this further with us. that's my. Not sure. We are at the moment discussing with PDT Norway the possibilities to kickstart the PDT work there by using what's already available. And so we're trying to row the same boat and to see if we can funnel some of the definitions that we made into PDTs. We're just exploring that at the moment. But I'm just showing that as a possibility what could be. Yeah. Yep. So your question basically is, how can it be that ATEM is implemented into the BSDD when we are not complying to ISO 12006? Or, well, yeah. Well, yeah, very simple. Maybe a lame answer is that we had the technical people from BSDD take care of that. And how they did it, I have no idea. But we do have an API that is spitting out JSON formats. So, yes, and it's how I see it. If they manage to get ATEM into BSDD, I think maybe we're not doing so bad after all. So, so being compliant with the standards. But we're here to learn. There's only one thing that we have to be careful of. We're already 30 years underway. We have a big ecosystem of companies and software vendors that have invested heavily in our standard. And one very common rule is don't try to fix what's not broken. So if we make sudden structural changes to our data model, you break a lot of software and a lot of investment of people and money. So we have to be careful with that. We're not saying that we don't want to change, but if we can change, we will do it, but with care. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, and please ask questions. This is the intention here is not to just give presentations, but to have a real discussion here. Okay, very good. Shall we move to Oivind?
Hello, everyone. My name is Oivind Rooth. I'm from Norway, or the Norwegian Building Authorities. I'm here to talk a little about SEN and ISO and how that works. Just maybe a little bit short about myself. See, I know quite many of you, but not all. I was learned to know buildingSMART International in the years of AIA in 2003. That's 20 years ago this autumn. The Norwegian delegation was in Singapore and learned about what we could do regarding building permit, but also Statsbygg and other was there. So that was the start of the BIM journey in Norway. And I was a part of buildingSMART. I think I was a vice chair. I think I was a title in buildingSMART International for 4 years, from 2009 to 2013. I also was with Tomi and Nick to start the regulatory room, which is still up and running today. But today I'm only out of the buildingSMART system. I'm chair of SEN TC 442, Building Information Modeling, a committee that was started in 2015 in Europe. And also for the last year, I have been chair of ISO TC 59 SC 13, which is the BIM committee in ISO. So when you hear about IFC is approved by ISO, that's happening in this SC 13 in ISO. Okay. So first, ISO TC 59 SC 13. As you see, this is a committee that you see the members here all over the globe. An interesting thing that should be for buildingSMART International. The last years, we have more or less the whole southern part, South America, as what we call P member. That is the participant member that have voting rights, and Argentina is observing members. So we are represented all over in AC13. That was traditional classification committee that also have extended the scope to take care of the building information modeling standards in ISO. This is the structure of the committee. We have several working group dealing. ISO 19650 is standardized in working group 13. So they do all the have responsible for the 19650 series. We have joint working group 12. It's interesting for buildingSMART. That is the working group that deal with the IFC standard and do the processing with the IFC approval for ISO at the moment. It's out on what we call a DIS ballot at the moment. It will be closed in middle of May. And we are all of us is quite excited to see if we have some technical comments, because then we have to do something together with buildingSMART. This SE13 and buildingSMART have ISO have their own directives as buildingSMART have, but we have made that is quite complicated, the rules of ISO and SEN. But we have a document, agreed document with buildingSMART how we operate, and this document is what we follow when we now is taking IFC through the ISO process. The interesting thing also with, especially with IFC, there is an agreement between buildingSMART and ISO, so buildingSMART keep the copyright. So it's buildingSMART that owns the IFC standard, even if there is an ISO stamp on it. Normally, ISO take the copyright. But we come to, for example, the IDM standard, and that is copyright by the ISO, not buildingSMART. Then we have the, I think we start this building in SEN. That is an European Standardization Committee, and for those of you that is not from Europe, SEN is the tool that the EU Commission or the EU used to harmonize the market in Europe. So SEN is quite closely connected to legislation and market and the EU system as well. But SEN there is more members in SEN than there are EU member. Norway and UK now is not member of the European Union, but we are member of SEN. And we are all obligated to withdraw any conflicting standards. So that means that there should be only, if there is a SEN standard, whole Europe should use this standard. And what we did some years ago, that when we started this, the first step we did was to adopt IFC as an European standard. And that ended the discussion of which standard should be the open standard for building information modeling in Europe. So that in Europe, it's IFC. Yeah, we have also some working group, the same overlapping with buildingSMART, digital twin working group. We have one on competence. We discuss just to try to agree on when we discuss that topic in we have one on infrastructure and data dictionary and so on. So this is quite overlapping with buildingSMART, and we are in process and also to collaborate with buildingSMART. So this is important to agree with this. Tomi said that it's important, and it's actually a good thing that we have this session here under the buildingSMART summit, because buildingSMART, SEN and ISO, also OGC, ETIM, all of us that work with the standards within the construction sector, or ecosystem, some the EU Commission has started to call it, is we should go in the same direction as support is so there's not compete. So that is the main goal here. We should support the industry and the government's needs, and we should work together on these topics. So that is a good thing that we are here. Just the last slide. This is totally. This is a map we are trying to have in send just to show all the standards that is related to BIM so far. This will be extended over time. This is possible to have as a spreadsheet if you want to. But this is, and some of this is buildingSMART, some of it is ISO, some it's SEN, some is from all the standardization organization, but we need, they all relate to each other if you want to do BIM in the industry. I think that's all from me.
Okay, very good. I think that this is kind of spot on to the topic that we have today, that what is the role for different of different organizations and different standards. Thank you.
It's important for us that we need to discuss this, because I understand very well that experts that we all need, that you all are, that work with this, are frustrated and about the system because it's complicated. But we need your expertise.
Okay, very well. We will come back to this later. But shall we move to Jim?
My name's Jim Plume. I'm a member of buildingSMART Australasia. I'm on the board, and I'm also on the buildingSMART International Steering Committee for the Infrastructure Room. So that's my main sort of claim to fame and my reason for being here. I started out life as an architect, but I pursued an academic career because I was interested in BIM, and from the early days in the mid-70s, and I just pursued that interest throughout my career. Importantly, I was in a faculty which spanned most of the disciplines across the built environment, and so I very quickly sort of started to see myself as a jack of all trades and an expert in none. But so that's me. When I was asked to join this panel, I've sort of taken a different approach to my colleagues here. I immediately thought of or remembered this old triangle diagram, which has been around now for a couple of decades, and in the early days defined the standard environment for buildingSMART. And so we had three basic sides of the triangle. We had the data aspect on the bottom, which was the IFC, and the ISO standard there doesn't really matter, it's just IFC. On the right-hand side, we have a process standard, which became known as IDM, Information Delivery Manual, and on the left-hand side, we have one around terms, which became effectively the buildingSMART Data Dictionary. And so if you want to think about buildingSMART and its contribution to standards, this is a good place to begin. I stole these words from somewhere on the web, so if the person who authored them is here, please forgive me. But these kind of describe what each of those standards is about in fairly simple terms, and I think it's a good starting point. But and I presume you have access to these slides later, so you can read the detail. I'm not going to go through that detail, because then I thought, well, where have we gone from there? What's the this is where we started 20 years ago, or roughly 20 years ago, and over in the intervening time, our interest and our connection with other standards has grown in each of those three directions. And so if we take the BSDD, it's probably the easiest one in a sense. We have now a second generation. Is it a second generation? Maybe it's a third generation. BSDD, which is a service provided by buildingSMART. We've already discussed it slightly. But it's all about hosting classification systems. It supports the information delivery specification, which is recently developed by buildingSMART. And it, I've said there confidently, it can integrate with other ways of connecting data, so particularly standards like OWL, which comes out of the World Wide Web Consortium. And so it seems to me that in order for us to understand the complexity of standards, we start to realize that once we started out in a very focused way as buildingSMART, but we've now started to branch out. And when we do that, we start to intersect with other standards. And in that space, I think the most critical ones are the linked data standards. That's my view. On the other side, in the IDM side, the IDM standard was developed as a way for human beings, just you and I, defining a process that you work your way through in order to arrive at, understand a process that is you're engaged in, and then to understand what are the exchange requirements for each of the steps in that process, so that you can start to define in language terms, in English, simple English terms, what information do I need at this point in the process in order to interact with another expert in the field, another piece of software. And it was purely a methodology to follow. I think there's been two significant developments around that. The first is only in the last couple of years, there's been developed a part 3 to that standard, which is concerned with developing a machine-readable IDM. So whereas an IDM previously was just a document, a table, if you like, of exchange requirements and following a process, now we're able to hold that process in a machine-readable form, known as IDM XML, which is not important, but it's a machine-readable form, so you can start to share that. And it's modular, so one can develop a part of a process model and define the information requirements associated with that, and store it in a way which is then can be used by yourself later or by others, and so you can start to mix and match, and it just facilitates the method of developing an exchange requirement. We've also recently, buildingSMART has established the use case management service, and it is fundamentally based on IDM, information delivery manuals. So it's adopted that process as a way of describing a use case. And so we start to see new ways of understanding and interacting with these standards. And it also links into the ISO 19650, the one that Emma spoke about, because it incorporates, in a loose kind of way, it incorporates the IDM process. So we see that these process standards that were evolved 20 years ago by buildingSMART have now started to mature and change and link into other sort of standards environments. And that's really is the theme of this panel session, is to talk about and to think about how this network of standards, how they all fit together. And I find this a reasonable way of doing that. The last one is IFC itself, and this is probably the one that I've been most deeply involved in, because I helped to develop IFC 4.3, where we've shaken off the shackles of building modeling and are now focused or extended the standard IFC to handle infrastructure. And that's led us down an interesting path, because we've had to, first of all, talk to OGC, that other spatial standards organization, and realize that in fact we need to collaborate with them and understand where their standards fit in with our proposed standards infrastructure. And so collaboration has been extremely valuable. I used to say that the work that we did in infrastructure would make OGC irrelevant, and I very quickly realized that was the opposite of the case. And so it's important that we start to understand the things like InfraGML, CityGML, GSIML, those standards that have come out of the OGC work now need to be integrated and are integrated with our own infrastructure standards. The other area there which I think is important is the model view definition, which is a way of defining a subset of IFC to support a particular business process. And we now have also developed ways of representing that information in a machine-readable form, so MVD XML. And we also, more recently, have developed a simplified version of that to handle more specific information exchange. And I'm not going to go into detail about that, but the IDS specification is a way of identifying what you specifically need in the way of an exchange requirement for IFC. So to me, this starts to unpack the way IFC has evolved, the way buildingSMART has been forced to engage with more standards and other groups developing standards. And in fact, I'm not going to get into detail, but there's lots of other domain and infrastructure related standards in there. Every jurisdiction around the world has standards around transport management systems and all of those sorts of things, and we need to connect to those. And so when we talk about standards, it's all about understanding we can connect and make use of the standards that exist, including ETIM. So there are all these things are ways of working, and it's confusing to us if we allow the whole complexity of it to just overwhelm us. But at the end of the day, we just have to understand you use the right standard for the particular piece of work you're trying to do. The other thing I was going to say, which I've sort of left out, is sometimes to me it's helpful to understand there are two types of standards that we use. There are those standards which are actually written for software vendors, and IFC is an obvious example. If you're an end user, you don't need to understand IFC in great detail. What you need to understand is that the software vendors understand it and they implement it in your software, and you use that software. The same applies to things like the machine-readable IDM. There'll be software tools that will start to emerge which allow you to create an IDM now in a computing environment. So you don't need to understand all of the detail of it. You simply are an end user. Whereas on the other hand, there are those other standards which are really designed to address us as human beings and guide us through a process. And so the original IDM standard is an example of that. And if you think of the standards in those ways, those two ways, then you shouldn't be frightened of things like CityGML or IFC, the ones that are designed to be implemented in software. You just simply use the software as an end user. That's more than enough from me. I'll sit down.
Very good. Thanks, Jim. Any questions at this point? Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Around the development, so there's a candidate standard for IDS that's out currently for vote till June. So the relationship between sort of the part 3 of 2941 IDM XML, MVD XML, IDS, and now, so like, can we get sort of more clarity around these three? That we're getting into standards that are now reaching the end user and how we're going to implement this. And we're trying to bring clarity to these different pieces, and how do we, like, where do we align, and how do we explain this to people in the relationship? I know I'm just going to finish here, like MVD seems to be phasing out, moving to IDS, and so there's a lot of legacy stuff that we have to explain. So how do we bring clarity to industry around these concepts and the standards that are being published also?
I'm going to attempt an answer. I can use this. I can attempt an answer to that, but I'm probably not quite the right person to give the definitive answer. He's downstairs in another meeting. But as I understand it, MVD XML isn't dead. MVDs aren't dead. They're used for certification, for software certification, and there also are many organizations, institutions, national bodies around the world who are still developing MVDs as a way of defining a subset of IFC to support their business processes. And we shouldn't interfere with that. And we can't change that. I mean, that's there. IDS has been developed by buildingSMART as a much more user-friendly, simpler way of defining a more focused exchange requirement. It's designed for clients. and as I understand it, and it's therefore has its own place, but it shouldn't be confused with. It's not designed to replace MVD XML. It's defined to support it, I guess, or to offer another way of doing it, a simpler way for simpler use cases. Does that help to answer the question? Yeah, so the part 3, the IDM XML, is simply a way of allowing software to be developed which can manage that machine-readable form of an IDM, so that you can start to develop your IDM using a tool rather than writing it with Word or Excel or whatever, and work through that tool to produce the IDM, the information delivery manual, the specification of data exchange for your particular business case. And the beauty of that is that you can start to, over time, you'll see modules being made available that you can pull in to do particular parts of that. And so you can start to assemble an IDM in a much more easier, flexible way than you can at the moment. That's the fundamental logic of it. And in fact, IDM XML is available, it can be exported or is integrated with the UCM tool, so the use case management tool. Because at the end of the day, use case is really just another word for another way of describing a IDM, if you want to put it really simply. Thanks, Tomi.
Thanks. Very good question, and I think now we are in my favorite topic, use cases and IDMs and so on. But I think that's worth clarification, and I think it could be even like a separate session to discuss these topics and kind of see what are the roles for these different standards and tools. I see IDS as a tool, more like, but very good. We should come back to that. Okay, last but not least, Espen.
My name is Espen Schultz. I work in a Norwegian software company called CoBuilder. I'm from Norway. Happy to see so many Norwegians also in this room today. We are in Europe. We have a big production in Bulgaria. We have 120 people in Bulgaria. And we are looking to broaden our activities also outside Europe when that time comes. I'm leading the research work in the company. We are focusing a lot on understanding the needs of the construction industry. We participate a lot in standardization work. Personally, I'm involved quite a lot in standardization development in SEN and ISO, these two committees that Oivind was referring to, the BIM standardization work in SEN and ISO. In buildingSMART, I've been here for many years. I've been in the product room for more than 10 years, and I'm also in part of the product room steering committee. Today, I will focus on support of data dictionaries, the framework of data dictionaries, which is more than BSDD. BSDD is one way of doing things. It's an implementation, but it's more surrounding the topic of dictionaries than just talking about BSDD. I think it's important for buildingSMART to get that into the discussions, so that buildingSMART also can help pushing this topic out in the industry. This picture is showing a collaboration between SEN and ISO that is fundamental, because we need horizontally between, this is Europe and internationally, we need collaboration, because there's important standardization work happening on both sides. And many of the same people are participating in the different groups, which is good. There is developed a series of standards that is covering the topic of data dictionaries. I'm not going into details, but we are talking about developing a data structure for carrying information about objects that shall be used in buildings and infrastructure. And we need this to be exchanged in a uniform way. Can be done different ways, but we need at least a common data structure as a fundament. And I also want to point down to the bottom right. There is recently been published a standard that will connect the environmental data into this framework of dictionaries, so we can use it in BIM, which is very important. That is disconnected today, but we need to get the information about the environmental impact of buildings into what we do. I've tried on the left side here to visualize an existing definition of things that we need to know about in the industry. So we have, in Europe, we have the construction product regulation that regulates all buildings in Europe and infrastructures. You have building codes all over the world. And under that, you have supporting standards and specifications. And within all these, there exists words, terms, names, definitions that we need to use when we are talking about information in BIM. So there are tons of local classification systems, but the language that should be used is here. So that is what this new series of standards is supporting. But we need to engage the industry to make this happening, and we need the software to support these standards. This is an example in Europe. In Europe, we have something called the Green Deal. So we need a fast transition towards greener pathway. So they call it a swift green and digital transition of EU industry and its ecosystems. This is a very recent published document, just the middle of March, and part of this document, they are already bringing in the framework of data dictionaries. So this is something we have to use. We have to build on this. So it's very important to link what we do here into legislation, so we can do good things together. And my last slide, this is to show that a data dictionary framework can and should be used by many of the things that we are discussing today in silos. It should be used in common data environments, building regulations, as I mentioned, asset information management, ISO 9650 is a framework of it. Semantic modeling and linking, that's for you, Michelle. And a lot of the other things. A common data dictionary framework can hold the terms and definitions for the information that we need and we need to use in our information exchanges. So that's my message. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Questions at this point?
We have a question from an online attendee, Anthony Brophy. Thank you, Anthony. He asks, what type of information do the panelists feel are missing from the ETIM, IFC and BSDD? And how does this affect the accuracy and completeness of technical product information in the construction industry?
Very good. Small question. But who wants to start? Jeroen?
Well, on the structure side, if you look at the roadmap of ETIM, we are looking into, for instance, small things like should we allow features to be grouped with labels? If we manage to do that, we're also getting a step closer to being compliant with the 23386. On the content side, if you look at the number of change requests we process each year, it's in the thousands, because products change, because you have very clever people working at manufacturers thinking about the next product that is conquering the world. So classification systems need to change accordingly. And there's always ground to cover. So in our opinion, it's never done. It's a continuous task that we need to keep on doing.
Yeah, I guess that one of the answers is that I see that the role of standards is kind of give the standards are giving kind of a framework that can be then kind of, that's our playground, and those are the rules that we kind of follow. But then within these rules, then we can extend and develop the things, for example, the dictionaries and data templates and such things. So I think that that's kind of one answer, maybe.
And in standardization, you always have to keep a balance between being stable, so don't change too much, but also be flexible to be in line with reality. So that's something it's a balancing act that we have to do.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure if this the answer, but the question. But we have a challenge in Europe, for example. There, everyone heard about the CE marking that is connecting to if you want to sell something on the European market, anything, also construction product, it has to be CE marked. And there is quite many numbers of technical committees in CEN dealing with the construction products and the property definitions. There is also some committee in ISO, and all of these the properties is actually defined in these TCs, and we need to bring this into the dictionaries and be in line, so we have one property definition, so we know what to talk about, and this is according to the standard. And we still have some work to do to make all these product TCs, for example, to make their the property definition machine readable, so it could easily be imported in dictionary and classification system. But we are working on it.
Yeah.
I'm wondering what is about the. For those who are online, I'm Russell Steinman. I'm wondering what is about Asia. So we heard here about CEN and ISO, and everything what we heard about was mainly influenced by Europeans, Americans. So what is about the Asian standards?
Yeah, good question. Oivind?
I can't ask for answer for buildingSMART, but the China and Japan and all the major Asian countries member of SC13. How active they are in developing the standards can be improved, maybe. Some is quite active, but they are a part of the decision processing, giving feedback when the standards are for balloting and so on. So they're following the work, but if we can look a little bit ahead, we see that the development at the moment, this changed over the years. We have been in this for also so many years, so we see this is changing. But at the moment, I think the driving force is in Europe. That can change.
There has been already. Jim, you want to comment? Yes, please.
I feel I should comment since I've come from that part of the world. From my perspective, Australia and New Zealand are actively involved in ISO, but it's not as strong as it might be in other nations, I guess. But we do have mirror committees that, as Oivind has said, that reflect and report on and critique any work that comes out of ISO. But of course, there's also lots of national standards, and every, as you all know, every country has its own national standards that affect all sorts of things, as Espen was saying. And so all that does is make the whole ecosystem much more complex, but it shouldn't scare us off. I mean, you have to work with the standards that exist in a national environment. And the important thing, as I see it, is that we are able to integrate with those standards. And a lot of that is through terminology, as Espen was pointing out, that the language we use to talk about objects and products and entities and things that we work with in the built environment, we all use different terminology for it. But as long as we have a mechanism for mapping our terminological concepts, and ontologies is a way of doing that, the data dictionary is a way of doing that, there are tools for doing that, that's where we need to focus our effort, is making sure we're all, as it were, talking the same language, even though we're not using different languages. Hope that helps.
Can I also?
Yep.
Unfortunately for ETIM, there are no chapters in Asia yet, but we're looking into that. We're open to anybody who would like to discuss that. I think ETIM, the way it's being set up, it allows for local languages to be used inside ETIM. It's very easy. If you're interested to see how that works, come see my workshop tomorrow where I go into detail with that. But it's not like we chose not to be in Asia, but Asia has not chosen us yet. So.
Okay. Sen, ISO, ETIM. Afterwards. Okay. Sen, ISO, ETIM. These have been mentioned several times, but the elephant in the room, of course, is that what is the role of buildingSMART in all this? And how does buildingSMART connect to this, all of these different standards and the developments? And how do you see their roles? Any comments from the panelists? Oivind?
I think buildingSMART seems to me to be stronger in Asia and US and Canada. And I think if buildingSMART can take also the message about the ISO standard that is out there, that can be useful for it could be a good idea, because we bring a buildingSMART standards to the ISO members all the time. So the other way, because we should bring all this together. Get the information out there.
Yes, I support that, and I also see buildingSMART with the global impact that buildingSMART has, the presence globally, should promote the standards that we are working on, not only in buildingSMART but also on CEN and ISO level, because we need, as I said previously, we need implementation, we need understanding, we need the software to get on board to start to use this, so we can start to use the standards and not just talk about IFC all the time, but we need this to be an arena for digitalization.
I see the buildingSMART standards as being kind of critical to that information layer. They are really the standards that enable interoperability. And without those, we're kind of in a mess because nothing will link up. So for me, they are really kind of that bottom layer, and everything else then built upon them. But I think buildingSMART kind of need to shout a bit louder about these standards, because yes, we know about them, but a lot of people in the industry don't even know they exist. They probably don't even know who buildingSMART are sometimes. So I think buildingSMART needs to have a bit more presence.
There's a very old cartoon or sketch, which maybe the younger don't know any longer, which describes the role of buildingSMART very well. There's a sail ship and there's a harbor. And the sail ship is buildingSMART and the harbor are the ISOs, the CENs, and so on. And I think this fits very well. buildingSMART is working with industry, tries out things, makes pre-standards, see whether it works. What buildingSMART does not have is a public negotiation or public influence, while the regulators, organizations, they have this public voting. And I think with these two ways of pre-standards and final standards really coexist very well. And also the standards which we have in ISO, SAN, DIN, and so on, they have to be revisited after 5 years. And there, buildingSMART has to come in again and say what worked and what doesn't work.
Okay, now.
Another question. So thanks for this presentation of the norms, so the numbers, and we have seen there are so many of them, so we are all overwhelmed or always to see that presentation. So I'm wondering, what is our role, or what we think as buildingSMART and Standardization Association, if we turn the process around, the perspective. So to turn the perspective towards the object, so I am an object and I have to be built, what norms are, what are regulatories I have to fulfill. So what are the norms I have to fulfill while I am in the use case, and what I as person in my role have to fulfill, what norms I have to fulfill. So what is the real task? So if we have an answer to that question, so this should be a good fundament to really do machine-supported process. So that helps us to understand what I have to fulfill. So what do you think? So what should we do as buildingSMART or as organizational associations to enable this turnaround of the view?
Anybody? Jim?
I agree with you entirely. I think that's a good way of thinking about it, to start off with the things that are concrete that we want to deal with, we want to design and manage and operate. And so as we were talking about the role of buildingSMART, I think both at the international and at the chapter level, my personal view is that we need to, we have a responsibility to the industry that we support to try and help them steer their way through this maze of seemingly conflicting standards. And so I would, coming from Australasia, I would favour us not just talking about IFC and the buildingSMART standards, but also to acknowledge within our own national context the other standards that exist, particularly the OGC standards, the linked data standards, all these things that are starting to impact on the way in which we can represent and understand the world that we live in, the world which we are responsible for designing. And so if we don't educate ourselves in how these different standards affect the way in which we want to design and manage and operate the built environment going forward, because we're no longer just talking about buildings, we're now starting to talk about infrastructure. And once you start to talk about buildings and infrastructure, then you get into this knotty area of digital twins and urban digital twins. And that seems to be the way in which the world is moving forward. And I see we have a responsibility to help our communities to understand what standards come into play when you're doing that. So sensor data needs to be managed through a standard, and so we shouldn't be inventing that standard. It already exists. There's a sensor XML standard, sensor ML, what it's called. So these things exist, and we need to become educated about that and be able to point to those and show how they work. All the linked data standards, we should not be afraid to actually recognize that these things are there and they have a value, they have importance in the context of where our agenda is, which is to design, build and manage and operate the built environment. So.
Okay, I think it's yesterday. Clive had a slide showing buildingSMART dealing with standard software, training of people, and the use case management. The ISO and SEN, I can talk about that as don't do that. We have a bottom-up approach. That means that when someone proposes a new standard, it's a need out in the industry. And as soon as it's standardized, it's out there, but we don't do anything more. buildingSMART could take the role to help the industry. What kind of standard is out there that support your use case? That may be, it might be more than the buildingSMART developed standards that fits together to put this together as a whole. buildingSMART can take that role because ISO and SEN will not do that.
In ATIM, we deal with product data on a very detailed level. That means having defined over 5,500 classes does not implicate that I know everything about all the product standards in the world. And I have to explain that a lot to our members. The thing is that when you talk to a working group of product managers from the tile adhesive industry, they know best what standards apply to their product, and we leverage that. So that's why we are very keen on our bottom-up approach, where people from the local industry discuss what they seem fit to be as properties for their products according to standards. So people of the lighting industry, they follow the latest from the eco-design. We can't do that, being the slim organization that we are. But we rely on the community for that.
I see the standards that we have like a jigsaw puzzle. So we've got lots and lots of puzzle pieces, and we kind of know what the picture on the box looks like, but it's not complete. And when we try and join some of the pieces together, they don't quite fit because they need to be slightly changed. So I really think that we need to focus on the picture of the box, that bigger picture, how everything joins up, and work backwards, so then work out how all those pieces together, rather than keep creating new pieces, because it's just getting more and more complex. And I would love to see buildingSMART, take the lead in that and in joining it up and helping to educate industry. Because one part of my job is I try and join, but there is just so many. It is getting really, really complex, and yeah, I think we're gonna kind of lose track of everything if we don't start to do that. But what we have is really good, and I think it would really work together. But we just need to do that piece of work.
Okay. Just a sec.
Thank you. Michel Beums, TNO from Netherlands. I really like to support what you just said, to reuse the standards that we have. So actually coming back to my first question that I had, and now in the light of all these presentations, how can we somehow make sure that BSI is going to use for the BSDD service, where all the stuff comes in, like the 80 models and many others, that they become 12063 IFD compliant, because that's under our control. We can do that. Yes? We have the standard. We have worked on the 12064. I think it's from the 80s, really. Yeah? From the Stabu, ISIS. So we took a lot of effort there, and you can still say, think about it, pros, cons, etc. At least we have a standard to define our IFC extensions or separate ontologies. We can, the semantic modeling and linking stuff, we can relate to it, yeah, as a kind of linked data binding there. But then somehow we have to make sure that this used within BSI find the ATM extensions, etc., etc. Anybody has an idea on this, how to do that, or why don't we do it at the moment? Eat our own standards.
Any comments? Maybe I could extend that question a bit, because it's a small question. No, really. But at the end of the day, the standards are an empty shelf if we don't have the tools that support the standards. So kind of the extension to that question, that how do we make sure that the tools that we are using, the design tools, tools like CoBuilder and so on, how do we make sure that they actually support and kind of implement the standards? Emma?
So in the industry over the past few years, we've always kind of been led mainly by technology, and that's not worked, because when we then share data between systems, we have interoperability problems. So it's getting the message out there that we need to adopt an information first approach, which is what buildingSMART's all about, really. But again, back to that joining up piece, if we could join up all those standards, get that information layer working, and then the technology should then just plug into it. And it doesn't matter which piece of technology it is. And therefore, we're not constrained by proprietary data structures like we have been in the past. So yeah, for me, it's really sorting that information layer out.
Just short, there is a new activity proposal now in buildingSMART. It's called IFC for products. I think that's one good activity to when we talk about IFC extensions, because buildingSMART is talking a lot about IFC, but we all know that IFC cannot solve everything. So we need more in the IFC usages. And one usage is use of data dictionaries, and buildingSMART needs to be a place to explore, to learn how can we implement standards that are developed outside buildingSMART. So in this example, it's how can IFC, for instance, use BSDD to enrich the information that is needed. So it's important that we again, maybe repeating, but buildingSMART, there is a lot of standards out there that buildingSMART should be an arena to explore and learn how to implement. Then we can get the push towards the industry.
I don't think I answered Michelle's question here, but just a comment here to this IFC for product. That was actually some activity that started in Sen, but it stopped the process in Sen, and I think that is the reason it's too early to go to Sen. So that is the sailboat. buildingSMART should try to explore this is a little bit more, and there is also an issue we need to discuss when we started in standards in Sen, for example, to using IFC directly in the standards. There is a discussion we need to have with buildingSMART that how that could be solved in a good way. So I think that the IFC product, for me, it seems that it's a good idea to start with buildingSMART Explore. And when you are ready, we can bring it to ISO and Sen. And then buildingSMART need to be sure they have learned it with IFC. They forgot with IDM standard and the IFT standard. You need to stick to take care of your copyright because you lost it with the two first standard. You didn't know about this, but you should have learned.
So if I get it right, it's kind of seen that buildingSMART can be seen as a kind of a flexible actor and kind of a more down the earth, kind of have buildingSMART has better understanding of the industry. Do I get it right? And then Sen and
you are more flexible. You can do more experimental things that we can't do in ISO and Sen because the directive don't allow it. So you can do more in buildingSMART.
That's good. At this point, any other questions? Yeah.
Thanks. Maybe a question for Emma around the relationship between your SDOs, so BSI, UK, or the chapter, and then the British Standards Institute. I think there's a lot of it goes through the chapters for buildingSMART well, at least from our perspective in Canada, we're actually trying to act as a catalyst to organize the different SDOs, boots on the ground, and get the standards, even if they're not BSI standards or buildingSMART standards, into practice. I'd like to hear, how did you sort of do this in the UK? I know you had your challenges with the different groups popping up and trying to herd the cats. We saw that yesterday, cat herder. So what are the sort of lessons learned and things that we could do to enable the chapters, I think, to help with this implementation and standards diffusion?
Yeah, so in the UK, we've spent a while really trying to communicate to the industry, about the standards in terms of BIM and information management. And what we have in the UK is we have NEMA, who were formerly the UK BIM Alliance. We have buildingSMART UK and Ireland, but we also have the UK BIM Framework, which was originally established as an agreement between NEMA, the Centre of Digital Built Britain, which no longer exists, and also BSI, the British Standards Institute. And what that framework is, it's basically taken ISO 19650 and it's tried to move away from where we were with BIM level 2. So we had a lot of people specifying they wanted BIM level 2 on projects, but didn't actually say what they wanted. So, that's pretty useless. So the UK BIM framework was set up to say, right, well, this is kind of what we need in terms of information management. And what the framework has is a multitude of free guidance, which has been produced by volunteers. We've tried to make it sort of plain language and it's available to anyone. So we've actually provided guidance for most parts of ISO 19650. We've also extended it and are going to be extending it a bit further to also start to cover buildingSMART standards. So we are trying to communicate this kind of, because some of it's, new language, new sort of ways of working that the industry isn't, that used to. So we are trying to really push the whole people first approach. And we do realise, the industry finds this difficult. Even on my own projects, I spend a lot of time educating people. So it's really just doing our best to try and get through all different avenues to kind of communicate these standards.
Yeah. Earlier we had a online question about what is missing from the standards and what should be added. There's, like I said, the standards are never ready. But what I see missing, not from the standards, but very rarely I see software implementers and the software vendors participating meetings like this. And when we are talking about standards, we are kind of just the standards people. But at the end of the day, we need to use tools in our daily work, and in order to get the job done, the software packages, the software tools that we are using, they should support the standards. Okay, we are almost done. Maybe, okay, there's an online question.
Just a few comments online, really. Yuha said that he thinks Jim's point was important. It's good to separate which of the abbreviations is a standard and which is a tool. Kjell was saying that there is now a revision of ISO 120062 being worked on with both Chinese and Australian participation. And Anthony really was just agreeing with Emma that it's good to join up the dots first. And he's also just made a comment that leaving egos at home, he says, is crucial for the success of the construction industry. We need to work collaboratively towards a shared goal.
Okay. So maybe to end this session, from the panelists, I'm asking that any final thoughts how buildingSMART should go forward, and what is the role of buildingSMART?
No, but first of all, I will thank you, buildingSMART, for setting up this session where we have discussing all the different standards. And I think this is a something that should be on the agenda for every buildingSMART summit, actually, so we can start working to have this all together. So I think, first of all, thank you to buildingSMART for setting this up.
I have a question myself, actually, because we're discussing today that we don't need extra standards. We need to be in line, actually row in the same boat or become a fleet of boats rowing the same direction. I'm not sure where buildingSMART stands in regards with the developments in the EU regarding the digital product passport. Does anybody have anything to say about that? Because we, as ATIM, were asked to be involved in that, but we're just set aside as important stakeholders. And we're worried about people trying to do the work all over again, which is, yeah.
I think we try to repeat every one of us to the Commission that they should use the standard that is there. And I think it's important if buildingSMART want to go, there will be a session discussion if there will be the European chapters are collaborating. I think it's important if we are going against European Commission, buildingSMART, SEN, and all of it, we should be as one, not separate, because then we can also open up for new interests, because there is many other interests out there that would like to make new standards. But we need to say, we have the standards, don't focus so much that because we are the experts, we know that maybe we should make a new standard. Don't deal it. We have the standards you need done. You need to use them, and we can help you implementing.
Yes, true. Yeah.
I'd like to make a comment. I think most national bodies, most countries, are producing BIM guidelines of one kind or another, and they're coming from different places. So in Australia, it's actually NatSpec that is producing a BIM guideline document, which is widely seen. It's been around for several years now. And they're the kind of documents that Emma was talking about, which help the industry to understand how to proceed down this BIM, open BIM pathway, and just where they come from, whether it should be buildingSMART that takes that responsibility at a national level, or whether it should be other groups within that nation. I think that's an important contribution, that if it's not being done by anybody else, then we should pick up the mantle.
Okay, thank you all panelists. Thanks for the questions from the audience and online comments. I think that we can close this up with the words of Oivind, that the standards are there. Start using them. Thanks.
Thank you very much to our speakers, and we hope to see you again soon.